This is the Roots and All podcast, and I'm your host, Sarah Wilson. Join me as I talk about all aspects of gardening with some of the top horticulturists from around the world. Hello and welcome to this week's episode, where my guest is Ella Malt. Ella runs an all-female gardening team in Norfolk called Soil and Soul. She's passionate about the intentional reimagining of existing spaces and about renovation over replacement. Listen on to find out how Ella started her business and developed her team, whilst maintaining a focus on sustainability and nature.
I didn't have a gardening background. I grew up actually without a garden. My dad went bankrupt in the 90s and we moved into a tiny house and we had like a little patio. So I had no kind of connection to gardening apart from my mum's pots that she used to do. She used to do loads of really beautiful pots, but I just had no interest in it whatsoever. And then I moved to the countryside after having spent about 10 years in London working at various jobs, and then started doing just like jobs here and there, a bit of PAing, a bit of business management. And I'd always really struggled with my mental health really, really badly. I was diagnosed with complex PTSD in my early 20s. And as a result of that, I was finding it quite hard to kind of hold down these jobs, but also they weren't very great in the first place. So I wasn't really very happy. And after the birth of my second son, I got postnatal depression and was basically at the darkest point of my life and was working a job I hated. I had a small baby that I was away from because I needed to earn money. And I was just like, I don't know where I'm going to go from here. So I had a particularly bad day and I got back to my house and I sat in my kitchen and I just thought to myself, what am I doing with my life? I'm doing nothing. I'm working in a job I hate. Everyone around me seems to be really productive and successful, and lots of my friends are artists or like photographers or designers, or my husband's an artist. And I was like, what skill have I got? I've got no tangible skill in the world. I've got nothing to offer. So what am I going to do? And I just sat for ages and was like, oh, it's too late to go to university and learn something. And what am I going to do? And then I just had this like thought of, where do I find flow? Where in my life do I sort of stop thinking and just kind of get so absorbed in a task? And it was cooking and weeding. And I didn't really have a particularly lovely garden at the time. I had a garden, but I used to go out and weed it. And would get lost when I was weeding, and just like the day would go and I'd come inside and I'd just feel really, really good. So I thought, well, weeding it will be, because I can't be a cook. I can't go and be a chef. I had friends who were chefs who worked like 80-hour weeks. So I was like, that's not for me. And I Googled how to become a gardener and came up with the RAGS traineeship from the WFGA, and saw their website and saw that you could work to retrain as a gardener. And I thought, well, here goes nothing. I signed up for it, didn't expect anything. Got a phone call within about 40 minutes of me signing up from Karen DeRosa, who was like the local area manager for RAGS. And she said, oh, there's a garden down the road. They've been looking for somebody for ages. And it's like 2 miles away from where you live. So I went for an interview, got the apprenticeship, and there was loads of crazy things when I went there. I turned up and I had like red hair in a bun, a black polo neck, black jeans, black boots. And the woman who owned the house, who opened the door, was wearing black polo neck, black jeans, black boots, red hair in a bun. And it was a bit like she was in her 70s, and we looked at each other and we were like, okay. And I've found out since actually that like for RAGS traineeships in Norfolk, it's really hard to get on a traineeship because there just aren't enough gardens that are offering it. So it was just like a really extraordinary chain of events that led to me actually even getting on the apprenticeship. Like I've got friends who tried to get on the RAGS apprenticeship after me and they weren't successful because there were too many people applying to too few gardens. So just the fact that I even got on it was kind of amazing. And so, yeah, so I trained up with the head gardener there, a guy called Paul Frostwick-Wilson, who was just amazing and like so generous with his knowledge and just shared everything he knew. And I was there 2 days a week, kind of learning, like baptism of fire, just thrown straight in there. And you know, going from not having a physical job at all to suddenly having a physical job and feeling like the world was new again, like totally like a little child, just in complete awe of like plants and physical labor and going into the pond and looking at the frogs and just being like, what is this? And I'm being paid to do it. You know, I feel like I'm a kid. So it was really extraordinary. And the change in my mental health was palpable. Like within weeks, I felt like a totally different person. And then kind of got offered loads of work really quickly. So it was almost like this was meant to be. It just kind of blossomed from there. So then started working. I decided to get in touch with a garden designer who was local to me. She just recommended me for doing maintenance on the gardens that she was putting in, and it kind of grew from there. Yeah, so just realizing that there was this, that you could make a living out of doing something that you loved, which was what I was looking for. I was looking for that, and I found it. So yeah, so that's how I got into gardening myself. It feels like it was meant to be. I don't know if that sounds a bit like mystical, but that is how it felt.
Yeah, I think these things do have a habit of falling into place. Once you're on the right path, things just seem to happen. But I don't think that sounds mystical. Well, if it does, it's certainly backed up by lots of people's experiences, I think.
Yeah, and I just felt like, anytime I'd come across another gardener, there just used to be so much. I mean, and there still is, to this day, with all the people that I meet on a regular basis, there's so much openness and generosity of knowledge and sharing. And that felt really new to me because I'd come from other kind of industries that I'd always dipped my toe in and out of with various different jobs that I'd had. And I always felt like there was a lot of kind of people wanted to keep things for themselves, or they didn't want to share their knowledge, or if you didn't have knowledge, they'd maybe make you feel a bit stupid that you didn't know something. Whereas I found in gardening, I suddenly felt totally able to admit that I didn't know things. And I think that was the key thing. It was like that authenticity of like, I know I don't know what that is, but I'll look it up, or can you tell me what it is? Or, there was this like really new way of being and learning. And it was so different from anything I'd done before. And then actually I got a lot of work really, really quickly because I guess I was just on the right path. And in fact, I had too much work for myself. So I started persuading my friends to join me. I was like, right, well, this has happened for me. I've completely changed my life. I feel like a different person. I'm happier. My children are happier as a result. My life is just generally better. I'm earning actually quite good money compared to what I was earning working as a PA for somebody in a small business in Norfolk. So, and that's what quite a few of my friends were doing. So I was like, you seem miserable. Do you want to come and work with me and I'll train you up? So that's kind of how the business started. I hadn't really kind of gone into gardening with any view of having a business whatsoever, but it just kind of grew naturally and just felt like such an amazing thing to be able to share, realizing that you can change your life. I always thought I was too old to do something else, but I don't know how old I was then, 35 or something. And I felt like, oh, my life is over. I can't change my career. But then being able to persuade friends of mine, even friends who are like 10 years older than me, that they could do the same thing was kind of amazing. And then realizing that we had this amazing team, and that meant that we could do bigger work and more interesting work and one-off projects. And it's kind of been amazing, actually, that as well, that sort of growth from me having a discovery about myself, finding this new career, persuading other people that it was the way forward. And then as a result, creating this kind of really strong team of women who we just have such a nice time. We have such a good time at work. And then sort of realizing I needed to form it as a bit of a business and have a bit of an idea of like what I was doing, what the ethos was. So quite quickly realized that in amongst the team, there were people who had kids, people who didn't have kids, people who were starting to go through the menopause, and like everybody had their needs outside of work, and that work needed to be really flexible around that. So, it might be that, I don't know, your kids forgotten their packed lunch and you've got to drive back across Norfolk to go and take their lunch to school, or I don't know, you're having difficulty in one way or another and you can't get to work at the time that you said you'd get there. There's always been a real flexibility around that in the business. And I sort of explain that to the clients, and ultimately they're not really worried about that because I'm always there kind of at the front, sort of saying, right, I'm here at this time, and the team kind of fit in kind of around me. So that's been really good, like having that flexibility in my own life to life's sort of changing demands, but also being able to provide that for other women has been really great. And obviously, because originally I was training everybody, it was such a great way to kind of double down on your own knowledge as well. So the more that you show somebody how to prune roses or whatever we're doing, you're sort of doubling down on your own knowledge, aren't you? And then other people, even if they don't have like the classical horticultural knowledge, they have ideas and creativity. So they bring their own creativity into the mix and the way that they see things. And it might not be how I learned how to do it, but because there's a discussion that we have amongst us as a team, we sometimes find a completely new way of doing something just because other people are bringing in their life experience and their knowledge and creativity from kind of other disciplines. that aren't just purely horticultural. So that's also been really fun to sort of see how we work, together as a team.
And you mentioned then about saying to clients, look, if we don't turn up at this time or this person's not there, then so be it. And that's kind of how we work. I think there's an element of educating clients, because actually I did a very similar thing to you. I was working in London and I just had an absolute breakdown, basically. And I said to my partner at the time, I don't know what to do. And he said, well, what do you like doing? And I said, gardening. And I was really bad at it. But I thought, do you know what? I do choose to do that in my spare time. And so therefore, why not pursue that as a kind of career change? I was slightly younger than you, but not much. And I went into it and I did maintenance for years and years. But the problem I had was that I couldn't expand my business because I couldn't find the right people to work with me. So you've kind of overcome that hurdle. But I think part of the problem for me was that my clients weren't that adaptive. I don't know if, a lot of them would kind of accept that, okay, well, I may not be here that day. There just didn't seem to be that element of flexibility. So are you, in a diplomatic way, educating your clients as to not just how you kind of run the business, but also how you garden? Do you have a sort of dialogue with clients where you say, right, this is how we run the business and this is what we can do for you and this is why it's going to be good for you in the long run and good for the garden?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that is exactly it. So one of the things I am good at is talking to the clients. So I've always got a real kick out of explaining why we do things the way we do, just getting people on board, and just saying, I run this business like this. These are the people I employ. I also explain, for example, that I run my business with very, very low profit. So I pay everybody a comparatively extremely high rate, certainly for Norfolk and sort of across gardening generally. So I kind of explain that to my clients as well, that, this is what they're getting as a sort of package when they take us on as a business, and also who they're supporting, that they're supporting local women, some of whom are single mums who are like the sole earners for their families. And that is why we have to be flexible. So I'm selling it as a kind of, this is who we are. We are this group of women. You're paying for us as a team, but also how we work. And, they're only paying everybody hourly. So if people turn up late, they're not paying for something they don't get. So they soon see that, and they soon see how we work, and the fact that we work so well together really works for the garden and works for them, because there's a good environment, there's a good atmosphere for those clients of ours that actually live in their houses. They're around to see us. I think they genuinely enjoy having us there. We get a lot of feedback about the team, if that makes sense. And so I think they come along with us, and how we garden, and we're very, very strict about what we will and won't do, to the point of losing work if needs be. Obviously we don't use any sprays. We certainly won't cut hedges in bird nesting season. And there are clients that want us to do that. And then I just say, no, we're not going to do it, and find another company. So basically, if they buy into Soil and Soul, they've kind of bought into us, and then they're along for the journey. And also explaining to them how we're at the beginning of kind of trying to be more proactive in terms of increasing biodiversity in the gardens that we work in. So at the beginning, we were like, we garden with nature in mind. And then I was like, that's too passive. We need to be more proactive. So, just saying that we don't spray isn't really enough. If they've got a particular aesthetic, for example, if they want their perfect gravel drive, they can have their perfect gravel drive, but we will hand weed it. And if they want their perfect lawn, they can have that. But if they don't want thistles in it, we're going to be hand removing them. And that comes at a cost, right? So it is always about that communication and just explaining how we work. And if they want us to work for them, then that's how it is. If that makes sense without sounding too stringent. But, it has to work for all of us, and that we're not going to do anything that makes us feel uncomfortable. And I was very, very sort of clear on being supportive of the team and whatever that means. And so far we've been really lucky to have clients that trust us and are prepared to come along on that journey with us. And they see the work we do. And, in the last couple of years, we've had loads of gardens come through which have been gardened by people who were just sort of lollypopping all the shrubs at the same time of year and whatever else they were doing. And eventually the client had realised that wasn't sort of working for the garden. So we get brought in quite a lot to take on these gardens and sort of rejuvenate them. And the clients are often talking to us about like replanting and taking things out, and explaining to them that a lot of how we work is that we're into renovation rather than sort of replacement. I mean, obviously we can add in things, but if there's there was a client who had a strawberry tree that they wanted taking out, and I was saying, well, look, we can crown lift that, and then we can see through it to that. And if we renovate that shrub behind it, you know, and it's that sort of thing, like trying to explain to them that they don't have to take everything out and replace it, that we can work with what's there and add into what's there, and always adding in more plants so there's not loads of bare earth. And you know, it's that kind of thing. So yeah, just getting clients to see the vision really, and involve them in it as well, and say, look, you know, you put that tree in, why did you put it in, you know, that sort of thing, like having that conversation and saying, you know, maybe we won't take it out, you know, maybe we'll just make it look better. So yeah, having the clients to sort of trust what we do, having the communication with them, getting them to come along with us and just believe in what we're doing. And yeah, they can see the benefits of it. I guess they're seeing what's happening in their gardens over the years. It's a nice feeling.
I think the thing about the gardening for biodiversity, I still feel that sometimes we don't know enough as gardeners to kind of find the best way forward or the most effective way. And so sometimes we're doing it almost intuitively. And you mentioned that you sort of network for knowledge. And does that involve, I suppose, multidisciplinary people who might be involved in design or garden care, or people who are ecologists, for example? Do you try and straddle all these disciplines so that you can get as much knowledge as possible?
Yeah. I mean, that is basically the plan. That is what I've been trying to do, certainly this year. I mean, previously I just was head down, just trying to get the business working and get enough work for everybody, and only really focusing on that. But this year I very much, just decided that I'd try to sort of spread my wings a bit and start, seeking out knowledge and meeting people and talking to people. And, you know, meeting Benny Hawksby when we did the Great Dixter weekend in February, you know, it was so brilliant. And just like having those conversations with him and going to see him at Eden in Clapham, and just, you know, having those conversations and learning and listening, you know. And of course, I do not know anywhere near enough yet, but each person I speak to, I learn a little bit more about the things that I need to be doing or not doing, you know. And so it is a case of just trying to bring in as many people as possible into the conversation and listen to conversations other people are having, and try to work out our own way through that and how we can bring that into how we garden, and the conversations we need to have with the clients about, you know, like if we're building habitat piles, or if we're not doing a inverted commas put the garden to bed at the end of the year that they've been used to, that, you know, why we're leaving stems and why we're leaving things and seeds, and it's that kind of stuff, isn't it? So it's like learning little things from each different person that you speak to and trying to pull it together into a bit of an overview, and work that into how we garden, and explaining that to the clients at the same time.
Yeah, so I'm guessing each garden that you go to has got its own sort of individual profile, and you have to respect that, I suppose, in terms of what's already there and the species that visit and everything. So I suppose my question is, as the business expands, how easy is it to pass on that message and to pass on those instructions to people who work for you? If you can't be physically on site all the time, can you communicate that effectively?
That's a really good question. At the moment, I am in all gardens at all times. But as it gets bigger, I guess it's going to come down to training and maybe taking the team to different places to learn from people and what they're doing. So I think it's going to have to be a sort of overall something that I bring into the kind of training program, rather than, me being there at the time saying, well, you know, we're going to do this or we're going to do this. So I think it will just become a part of how we work, but it is going to be, I mean, it's a good question. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot, actually. How do I make everybody have the same understanding? Because obviously, if I'm having those conversations with people, I've got to disseminate that information back to the team and just try to get them as involved as possible.
You know, it's another challenge of scaling the business and thinking about that. What are you thinking the future of the business will be?
I want to do community work, community projects. I think that is where we're going to get the most out of what we do, because at the moment, you know, I think there's a huge benefit to doing what we do in the private gardens that we do, because gardens need to be as beneficial for biodiversity as they can be, because especially in Norfolk, they're these massive great gardens, you know, that are just in the middle of these rather weird barren bits of sort of heavily farmed agricultural land, you know. So they're, you know, it's learning about how that all knits up together as well. But the community projects, I think, is something that I'd like to start moving into doing, and working with people in the wider community and children. You know, I worked at a school for a while. When I first started gardening, I was gardening at school, and it was brilliant, just chatting to kids and about what they think about nature and getting them out into the garden, and kids who don't have gardens themselves, and there isn't very much access to any wild spaces. This was in Norwich. So that was great. And we'd take them out to a lake and do green woodworking and stuff like that. And it was brilliant. So I'd like to kind of try and incorporate, I don't know how at the moment, but that's something for the future. I need to start talking to some people about that, I think.
It's so funny. Like, I speak to so many people in gardening, and I find that a lot of people's journeys echo each other's. And, a lot of people are career changers and they get into gardening and then they find that it's really therapeutic. And then they sort of move beyond that into, like you say, the community side of things, and maybe more into the food growing. And then I think the next step is the kind of spiritual connection as well, and you start becoming really philosophical about gardening as a whole and the impact that it has both on a kind of individual level and at a community level. I think gardeners maybe are particularly thoughtful because they've got the space in their mind to reflect on what they're doing. There's something about it. It's something that gives you that space to reflect. I don't know what it is, but it's a very common theme. And I kind of think sometimes maybe you could shortcut those processes and go straight to the, right, okay, well, people, this is the importance of what we're doing, or whether it's a kind of where we are in terms of society that, you go on this journey and then you kind of find that gardening really properly roots you, and it's just that we're that sort of generation or generations that forgot to do it, and now we're reconnecting and we're realising the importance of the whole of it. And I think it's becoming more common, and I hope more people are getting into it.
I think they are. I think, I certainly know, like, even amongst my friends that, they're definitely starting to see the benefits of just being outside more, even just that. And then, like, paying attention to what's around them. I guess if people can see what's around them, they can start to care for the things that they see, can't they? So it's like people are so disconnected from nature. And as a general rule, like, we've all been so disconnected, like as you're saying. But, getting people outside, interested, engaged, it can only be a good thing. And I mean, I wish there was a shortcut. I wish, it is, as you say, lots of people seem to be going through exactly the same kind of journey. And I wish there was a bit more of a, like, immediate path for people. But maybe that's the role of people who've been through that journey, to decipher and to, as you say, like, to work out a way of making those connections to people more quickly, perhaps.
You're tempting people over to the light side. You're going, come on, leave corporate world behind. Go and garden. It's lovely. So you're already like the Pied Piper of gardening.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Somebody said that to me the other day. But because I think the thing is, if there's such an obvious, certainly amongst my, people who don't know me, obviously they don't care. But the people that have known me for a long time, who could suddenly see this, like, unfurling of a human being and being like, wow, you're really different. You seem really well. And it's like, and that is because of what I do for a living. And that's quite an amazing thing to be able to say, that actually I do a job that makes me happier, and I earn money, but also, so it's like, you can come and do this too. And that's not to say there aren't terrible days gardening, but I find, like, I was talking to the team about that the other day, and we were just like, even in the middle of winter, when we've got like 59 layers on and we're doing something, I don't know, in the rain, we're together, and that's an amazing feeling. And we're still outside and we're moving our bodies and we're feeling the elements and we're working on a kind of communal effort, albeit in a private garden, but we're working together as a community. The 8 people that I work with, we're working with a common endeavour, and it just makes you feel good, even on a really dark November Wednesday when it's pouring with rain and every single item of clothing you're wearing is soaked.
Thank you very much to Ella for a great chat and for sharing the ethos behind her amazing business. And thanks to you for listening. If you like this interview, I recommend checking out episode 2, Hiring a Gardener with Claire Vokins, released on the 19th of June 2018, and episode 284, The Organic Nursery, released on April the 29th, 2024. You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website rootsandall.co.uk. Please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support the podcast. Because if you enjoy the show, please help it continue. I also have a GoFundMe where you can make a one-off donation. Even a one-off donation of £1 helps, and I'll be really grateful for your support. So please go to Patreon or GoFundMe and search for Roots and All Podcast.